Analog horror had a generational run. Series were popping up left and right, most of them getting millions of views, and everyone seemed completely enthralled in this horror subculture. You couldn't open up YouTube without seeing a distorted face, a corrupted emergency broadcast, or some guy with big lips explain the backrooms lore to you. For a few years, analog horror wasn't just popular, it was one of the biggest things in online horror, but that's just a memory now. A burning memory, if you will. These days, there are hardly any new analog horror series breaking into the mainstream, and the ones still continuing are getting a fraction of the views they once had before. The giants of the genre had either ended, slowed down dramatically, or simply aren't putting the same numbers up anymore. Meanwhile, the internet has moved on to whatever the next big thing is. So, what happened to analog horror? The 2010s were an interesting time for the internet to say the least, especially internet horror, with creepypastas popping up everywhere. It seemed like anyone could just upload something remotely scary on the internet with zero context, and it could make the rounds everywhere. But what I want to focus on here is not creepypasta, but the release of Marble Hornets and No Through Road, the blueprint for what analog horror would become. Released in 2008, No Through Road follows four friends who find themselves trapped on a road that seems to loop endlessly. On the surface, it's just a low-budget found-footage horror film, but what makes it different is the story isn't explained to the audience. There are no lore dumps, no monster backstory, and no clear answer. Instead, viewers are forced to piece together what's happening themselves. That sense of mystery would become one of the defining characteristics of analog horror. The fear doesn't come from what you see, it comes from what you don't understand. Then in 2009 comes Marble Hornets. While No Through Road establishes the mystery, Marble Hornets expanded the formula into something much bigger. Instead of telling a complete story in one video, Marble Hornets lasted across hundreds of uploads over several years, spanning the length of 9 hours of content. This fragmented storytelling would eventually become the basis of analog horror. Series like Mandela Catalog and Gemini Home Entertainment would rely on the audience to do much of the storytelling themselves, just like Marble Hornets did over a decade earlier. But the most important thing these series introduced was the found footage style of horror. And yes, I know Blair Witch Project did this earlier, but that was a movie, so you knew it was fake. But these are just random videos uploaded on the internet. So little me at the time thought Slenderman was real, and that I just watched someone get brutally murdered right in front of me. You know, maybe unrestricted internet access as a child wasn't too good. But hey, I gotta watch Tobuscus. That's pretty cool. You know, I wonder what he's up to right now. Food stamps. Is they cutting?
Google, let me ask you, is they cutting food stamps? How long that gonna be for? Biscuit, nugget, and a biscuit.
He didn't even know. He didn't even know they were pedophiles. He probably thought they were black.
Well, okay then. Not how I'll choose to remember him. But it wouldn't be until 2017 when analog horror really would start with the creation of Local 58. If Marble Hornets and No Through Road created the blueprint for internet horror, then Local 58 was the series that transformed the blueprint into what we recognize as analog horror now. Local 58 adapted the public service announcement style, which we will see a lot more with other series. Local 58 presents itself as a collection of recordings from local television stations, emergency broadcasts, children programming, weather reports, late night advertisements. At first glance, everything seems completely normal, but slowly things begin to turn dark. An emergency broadcast that says it's the government mandate to go into your front yard and take your own life. A children's cartoon that gets more disturbing as it goes on. Or a PSA to not look at the moon or you will die. Which kind of sounds lame, but I promise it's actually cooler than that. But I mainly want to talk about my favorite from the series, and probably the most influential one, Real Sleep. It starts as the usual broadcast telling the viewer some facts about sleeping and that dreaming is for idiots and how to trick your mind into not dreaming. It instructs you to look into the middle of the screen and keep staring while the program flashes scary faces. This works so well because our brains are wired with pattern recognition to seek out faces to avoid predators. But when the face is distorted with impossible features, our brain's pattern recognition realizes that something is wrong and triggers our fear response. A scary clown movie might be scary to someone because they have a phobia of clowns, but to someone that doesn't, it might not be scary at all. But with this instance, this is a cheat code for everyone to find it scary because our brains are hardwired to be uncomfortable looking at these faces. That's why it works so well, and also why every other analog horror would also use this. So Local 58 got millions of views, and tons of people got encouraged to follow this new horror trend. Found footage, fake PSAs, uncanny themes, distorted faces, and all you have to do is throw an analog static filter over it. And boom, there you have it, the recipe for every single analog horror. Which brings us to the next two, Gemini Home Entertainment and the Walton Files. Gemini Home Entertainment would follow the analog VHS theme and expand it by making a longer series and a bigger story to analyze, getting more people interested in analog horror. The Walton Files would take a more mascot horror approach to the genre, but really tone up the disturbing imagery and distorted faces. It proved analog horror could be more than creepy broadcasts and hidden messages. It could tell a compelling story, add memorable characters, and genuine emotional weight. In doing so, it helped push analog horror from a niche internet genre into the mainstream, which now leads us to the peak of analog horror.
Man, I love Jesus.
Alex Kister's Mandela Catalog and Kane Parsons' The Backrooms series are probably the undisputed peak of what analog horror is. The Mandela Catalog would perfect the distorted face theme and have an interesting concept of alternate humans that look like people, but something about them is wrong. The Backrooms would take the liminal space theme from earlier and pretty much now own that title. It would take an already interesting concept of a limbo of reality disguised as an old office building and make it into a complex series of lore. For context, the Mandela Catalog has over 60 million total views, and the Backrooms has almost 200 million. That's more than half the population of the United States. And that's not even counting the millions of views YouTubers would get from reacting to these series. This is the height of popularity for the genre. It also helped tremendously that this was the middle of COVID lockdown, so everyone had nothing better to do other than stay in their house, watch their favorite YouTuber talk about analog horror, and play Fortnite all day.
If I shoot you, you're in the clan.
Please be in the clan, please be in the clan, please be in the clan, please be in the...
Sorry, you didn't make it.
Man, fuck you.
Like I said before about reaction channels, sometimes the analog horror is too scary for you, or too confusing for you to understand. This would be the perfect opportunity for channels like Wendigoon to make an actual killing here and get tens of millions of views, and also allowing a bigger audience to be familiar with analog horror that would have probably chose not to watch it themselves. But the tremendous amount of success these series brought to the genre would ultimately be its downfall in the saddest way possible. When something is generally not that hard to do and you can get millions of views off of doing it, it tends to bring people that aren't doing it because they're interested and have a good story to tell. They start doing it to follow a popular trend and to cash in on it. And when that happens, it brings oversaturation and audience fatigue. And when that happens, it brings the LARPing of analog horror.
Don't go to sleep tonight. I'm coming for you. Every single one of y'all gonna stream.
Analog horror is not hard to make at all. I mean, if you take a look at early Mandela Catalog, all it is just basic editing and then getting a picture of someone's face and stretching it or giving it the Germa smile. What's stopping everyone from just downloading a free editing app on their phone and putting old music and a static filter over a shitty video? Well, nothing. And that's exactly what everyone did. Now, in order to find a good analog horror, you had to sift through tons and tons of bad ones. And yes, some of them were satirical, but the vast quantity of analog horror being made is by some teenager who sees two other teenagers make the Mandela Catalog and the Backrooms and think they can do it too. Also, I forgot to mention, Alex and Kane were both like 16 and 17 when they made these series. So yeah, if you think it's too late for you to start something or to learn a new skill, that's completely true. You should just give up now. So everyone is getting flooded with these bad analog horror series, like the Batman analog horror and the Godzilla analog horror, and they just came off as trying too hard and cringy. And I really can't state how many analog horror series got made. So for this part of the video, I want to play a little game. Curse Content's Wacky Analog Horror Challenge. This game is simple. Go into YouTube search and look up one of your favorite things. This could be your favorite game or favorite movie, and then add analog horror at the end of it. And 9 times out of 10, there will be a video made about it. And then come back here and leave a comment talking about how shit it was, because 70% of the time, they are shit all the time. Look, I'll even play this game too. I'll just think of 3 things that pop into my head, and I'll look them up and see if there's an analog horror about them. Invincible, Oni Plays, and Jeffrey Epstein. That's an actual blunt rotation from hell, and I've no clue why those were the first 3 things that came into my head, but let me look them up. Yep, all 3 of those analog horrors exist for some reason, and they're all shit. And basically, what I'm trying to get at here is there was so much analog horror, and everyone was starting to get fed up with it. The crappy analog horror just oversaturated the genre and started to sour the name. And you know the biblical saying, he who was without sin cast the first shitty analog horror? I'm here to admit that 4 years ago, I made a shitty analog horror too. I know, I'm not proud of it. It was pretty bad. It started as one of those shitty infographics where it talks about animals and whatnot, and to be honest, I didn't even take it serious at the time because at one point I put beavers love eating wood, which beavers don't eat wood. And then the video gets darker until it transitions into me getting dragged away into the woods and getting killed by one of the unexplained animals. So yeah, that will never see the light of day again. But now analog horror had a mixed opinion, and it was hard to find actually good analog horror series. And now it wouldn't be long until Urban Spook hammered the next nail into the coffin.
I'm very disappointed in you.
Urban Spook would upload an analog horror series called The Painter, which follows a serial killer killing people and the police's effort to catch them. Pretty typical stuff. The problem here is this was just gross shock value horror, so skip the next 30 seconds if you don't want to hear about this. The videos would describe in detail child and torture and forced abuse, which isn't scary at all. It's just disgusting and being edgy for the sake of failing in every other department. And there's a lot more too that I won't go into detail about because I hate this series, but the community also saw this and shit on him accordingly because there wasn't really anything good about it. The story sucked, it wasn't scary, it wasn't creative, it was just shock value torture porn, and this led to analog horror having a more negative outside opinion associated with it, that people making these series and watching them were just edgy kids. And you know, maybe making analog horror probably isn't for everyone to do. There wasn't a direct drop-off, but as the years went on, analog horror began to fizzle out. The great analog horror series had ended and run their courses, and the ones still continuing were getting fractions of the views they once had before. The only exception would be the Backrooms, that still kept its viewership, and The Boiled One would also be released and be really successful, but everything else began to plummet. I only mentioned a few series earlier, but I can't stress enough how many great analog horror series were coming out during the peak time, and they were coming out so quickly one after another, like Monument Mythos and the countless FNAF tapes. It also didn't help the genre that the person who made some of the FNAF tapes is a pedophile, and some of the new FNAF tapes is also just shock value CP cannibalism, which I have no clue why every FNAF fan project has something to do with CP. It's a little concerning, to be honest. People would still attempt to make analog horror series, and they would get views, but none of them would come close to the popularity of what once was. Probably the most recent one of popularity that I can think of would have to be Angel Engine, which has a cool idea, but is entirely made out of AI. So a lot of people felt it was just AI slopped, and left it at that.
How to cage an angel.
I want to try this, but it's haram, so no. Analog horror was really starting to fizzle out, but the only bastion of hope for the genre is the Backrooms movie, which comes out today. So let me actually go watch that real quick.
2 hours later.
Yep, I thought it was good. It wasn't perfect, but it wasn't bad. I thought it was a good movie. I thought it was a good, faithful representation of the Backrooms. I see that there is already a big mixed opinion on the movie, so I do plan on making a future video going in depth on the Backrooms lore and movie. So subscribe for that, I guess. But yeah, it was a good movie. The only question is, will this help revive analog horror? Unfortunately, that's something only time will tell. But let me know in the comment section, do you think analog horror will continue to be a prominent subgenre, or is this relegated to a past trend of the early 2020s? I can really see it going both ways, and there's no telling what will happen. So what killed analog horror? Honestly, nothing. The genre simply got too successful. Success brought imitators, imitators brought oversaturation, oversaturation brought audience fatigue, and audience fatigue is usually where internet trends go to die. Sure, Urban Spook and others poor quality analog horrors helped with audience fatigue, but just like 2000s creepypastas, there wasn't a killing of the genre, it just slowly withered away until people stopped making them and moved on to other things. That might be the case here with analog horror. Or it could be the exact opposite, and the Backrooms could perform really well and inspire more people to continue analog horror and bring it back to what it once was. But in the meantime, there's no way of telling. Thank you for watching the video till the end. I do hope you enjoyed. This was Cursed Content.